Hello all, welcome to the data science seminar of Chennai Mathematical Institute. Today we have our speaker, Professor Rajiva Karendikar, and probably he doesn't need any introduction. As you know, he's leading the institute for last 10 years. So uh, without any further delay, I would request Professor Karendikar to present his work. Thank you.
Yeah, so welcome students and others who are who have joined, but primarily this is aimed at students. And I know most of you have joined this MSc Data Science program, and you also see in the curriculum there are some statistics courses, and many questions may be occurring in your mind as why are we learning this, why are we doing this and that. This talk will kind of clear some of your ideas as to why we still need these statistical ideas even in this era of big data and analytics. Okay, so so over the last few years, maybe at least 10, one often hears that with tons of data available, who needs statistics? Uh, why do we need statistical models, statistical inference, and all that? We have data mining, we have artificial intelligence, and that along with the data will give all the answers needed. No need for statistical ideas, no need for statistics. I've heard this, and if you have not heard it, you may hear it later. So, well, the reason it's fair for people to ask this question because statistics evolved as a science in the era where the amount of data available was small, uh, and efforts were on to extract maximum information out of whatever is available. Okay, so you would be amused today that at least the textbooks that I studied when I was a student 40 years ago or 45 years ago, let's say, BSc, MSc, around that time. And perhaps it continued till even when Saurish was a student. And if you see some old books, you will see that will say if n is large, then instead of t distribution, we can use normal. And then what is large? N equal to 30 was considered large. Okay. 30 data points were considered large as per the books. So this I'm just saying this to put in perspective that even the words large and big are all relative. Large relative to what? Okay. So then a natural question that if this is evolved in an era where you used to treat n equal to 30 as large, now why are we reading it still today? Right? Well, what I'm going to do is that I illustrate via examples that while some of the techniques that I studied or maybe I taught may no longer be relevant, the concepts which are underlying these are as relevant in this era as they were then. So the statistical concept have evolved roughly at least over 150 years, if not more. Okay. Some of the concepts even go way before that. As those of you who are attending my crypto course would have heard that the breaking of symmetric ciphers, substitution ciphers, using what today we can call statistical ideas, but basically frequency count and etc., goes back about 500 years. Predates anything else in statistics that I had read. So these are common sense ideas, and they have evolved over such a long time. And what we will see is that using these ideas, actually, we can do a lot better today than without these ideas. Okay. That is what we will be. And now, examples illustrating my examples is a very funny thing. Okay. I can always come up with an example where a proposed methodology given by someone else looks ridiculous and my methodology looks better. Okay? You can always cook up some very weird example. So that illustrating via example and stressing that doesn't really go down well with people. They'll say, yeah, maybe. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that some of the examples, not all, but some of the examples are actually from history. Okay. That these things actually happen. So it is not my figment of imagination that suppose such and such was the data and so was interested, and suppose based on this data they drew this inference, it would be wrong. As a mathematician, one can always start with suppose and illustrate what I want to, but here I'm not going to suppose. I'm going to illustrate from concrete things which happened. Okay, inference that people drew or tried to draw. But let us first start with the question: what does big data, analytics, data science, what do these phrases refer to? So you all would have heard the story of 10 blind men or 7 blind men or men and women trying to figure out what is an elephant by touching the elephant. Different people are touching at different, somebody is holding one leg, somebody is somebody is sitting on the elephant, somebody is... so depending on what part they are feeling, they have a description of what is an elephant. Okay? Because they have not seen the whole thing. Somewhat like that is happening today with what does, when people talk about big data analytics or data science. Depending on what part they come from, what background they have, that is their view of big data. So for some, big data is simply technical ability to process large chunks of data. So traditionally, you could run through maybe a few 100,000, maybe 100,000 data points and quickly come out with mean, median, regression, plot this. Now you may have a billion data points and you should still be able to do that. That is what big data is about. So a few years ago, I had gone for a industry summit by NISCOM. That's one of the national associations of industry. And there was a session on big data where I was invited and I was to be a discussant. And all the papers presented there or whatever talks in that session, each of them had this underlying theme that we now know we have big data era. We have to be able to process large chunks of data. So what do we do? Our database will not work. We will need this, we will need that. But that is all their view of what big data is about. So let's see what is my view. Okay, I'm not saying that I have the last word, but I'm telling you my view. So my view is that broadly speaking, all of these phrases are about the same, and what it refers to is taking data from some problem or some domain, discovering relationships among different elements of the data, and using the same for understanding the underlying phenomena, and not just understanding, but deriving actionable intelligence out of it, some action which may lead to some profit or enable us to do something which earlier you could not do, things like that. Actionable intelligence. Deriving actionable intelligence out of the data. And how do you derive that? That is through discovering relationships across different elements. Now, let's start with some examples. So simple. Let's say you all know, you all are above 18 years old and legally you can be, it's legally valid for you to drink, but you all know, drink I mean alcohol, and you know there is a law that you can't drive while after drinking alcohol. Now, I wonder if any of you have thought about this, but how would a law be written that driving after drinking is illegal and you can be punished? Because depending on how the law is written, the police, if you challenge, if you promise quickly that, yeah, I was drinking and pay off the fine or pay a bribe or whatever, that's one thing. But suppose you are stopped, the police says you have drunk and you say, no, I have not Then they pull you up. You are supposed to go to a court later, not that day, not that night. But in the court, you say, I was not drunk. Now it is your word against the policeman's word. So the law will require the police to prove that you were drunk. Now, if the law said that, if during the last 1 hour before driving you had so much amount of alcohol, then you are drunk. Now, how will the police prove? They can prove at best that you were at a party. There can be some witness or something. But how will they prove that you actually drank and that it was within the last 1 hour? That's not doable. So the law doesn't say that. What law specifies is that the percentage of alcohol in your blood should be below a certain threshold. If it is above that threshold, whether whether you consumed alcohol or not, you will be considered as drunk and you would be fined. Okay. So the alcohol percentage in blood is what determines whether you are drunk or not. But now, how will the police determine? Let's say you are returning from Mahabalipuram after a weekend binge party, and then somewhere on ECR you are stopped. That the person driving is drunk. Now, imagine the scenario if they have to take out the blood to determine the alcohol percentage in blood. Even in non-pandemic scenario, you would not like a roadside fellow to, give you a jab and take out blood from there, because that may lead to more infection and it may create more problems than what drunk driving, right? So that is simply a no. Police cannot be standing on roadside with a syringe to draw blood. So what do they do? So what was observed by people was that there is a relationship between percentage of alcohol in the blood and percentage of alcohol in the air that you breathe out. Okay. And therefore, based on this relationship, they have developed this machine which is breath analyzer. They hold it near your nose, and as you breathe out air, it determines, and then funnily enough, it shows the reading alcohol in blood. It doesn't say alcohol in the breath. Or it will not say anything. It will give maybe red and green. If it is red, you are drunk. If not, you are okay. But so this is based on actually data generated about people with alcohol in their blood and alcohol in their breathing out air. And based on that, this is done. Some of you would have studied. Second year students would know what is regression. First year students, you will be studying what is regression. So this is, they discovered this relationship is, one can see is almost linear regression is what is used in determining this relationship. So this is one example of concrete use of data. Okay. Now, it could also be a question of classification of images. So you have a library of photographs which have been classified, namely have been labeled, called training data. Then one needs to classify one or more images. It could be detecting fracture. The doctors do the X-ray plate and they look at it and decide. But it can be done, and perhaps done even better, using the classification techniques. Many things which have been based on fracture, you label them appropriately, and now as soon as a X-ray is taken, even before you take it to the doctor, it just says yes, fracture, no fracture, or cancer, no cancer, or so on and so forth. So the applications are immense about classification of image, and it's again the tagging data with labels, and then this could also be a problem of face recognition. So you have a library of photographs of culprits or people who have perpetrated some kind of crime, and then they run through image has been captured of a possible suspect or from the crime scene, and now they are trying to run it against their library to see if it is closely matching anyone. If it does, then they can quickly go and try to investigate where that person was when this crime happened. Okay. So now in your courses, you would have seen, and you will see many more examples. So this is what is data science. Now, These problems or similar problems have been dealt with statisticians over 150 years. Okay. One difference is, while earlier the data was few hundred, at most couple of thousand data points, now it can be million, even billion. And that is where the word big data came from. Well, now the argument goes that with small data, one had to build a statistical model and deduce the conclusion. Do we need that in the era of big data? That is the question. All right. So, while I'll come to this question, first thing to note is that in several contexts, we do have tons of data, but not all problems where we wish to draw inference from the data are big data problems. There are concrete problems which are small data, that means few hundred or few thousand data points, and we still need actionable intelligence out of them, and therefore they are outside the realm of big data. Well, two problems which immediately come to my mind are opinion poll and quality control. These are two contexts where the data is not big. Okay. Now, some may consider or do consider opinion polls as a frivolous activity. That big deal, 2 days before counting, you come out and say that, okay, maybe this will happen, big deal. Anyway, after 2 days, you are going to know the results. So what is the big deal? So this, okay, let's leave that aside. But quality control has played a major role or major part in making and breaking companies in the last 100 years. Especially in manufacturing company, which is quality conscious and takes care and uses quality control techniques to improve their manufacturing process, will do far better than those who continue to work with older techniques. And a concrete case in point is the Japanese car industry. If you are interested in cars, or if you do some Googling and read history of how was it that Japan became the primary seller of cars well ahead of Europe and US, at least in the 80s. Others have gained ground, but in late 70s and early 80s, the Japanese car industry took the world by storm. And the US car companies had even a question of existence. They all were almost bankrupt. And the reason was that Japanese cars were cheaper and were of better quality. Interestingly, several years down the road, with the US threatening trade sanctions and so on, some of these car companies, Japanese car companies, signed deals with US car companies, and they set up a joint manufacturing unit in US. Now I forget the names of the companies involved, but let's say Honda. So Honda and American Motors, or Honda and General Motors, set up a plant. These names may be wrong, but the fact I am remembering from memory. They set up a plant, they make cars, and the agreement is that 50-50 basis they will label them. So 50% have the American label, 50% have Japanese label, Honda. It's known. It's not that it is not known. Yet in the market, the dealers offer huge discount on the American brand as compared to the same car which is with a Japanese label. And this happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And when some correspondents went to ask the people, how come you are willing to pay more for the Japanese car but not for the American brand, though both have come from the same assembly line? The fellow says, well, I know that, but in the used car market, Japanese car have a better price. So 4 years down the road, when I try to sell my car, I will get a better price if it is Honda. Therefore, I am willing to pay more. So this is how the main difference was using quality control techniques. Anyway, this is to say that these statistical techniques have played a major role. Okay. But now let's come to the biggest example of them all. Last, for 10 months, more than 10 months, we are waiting for COVID-19 vaccine. We have now a few, I don't know, 3, 4, depending on which you count in and which you count out. There may be a few more to come. And now that you are studying here data science, but even commoners, your friends who were continuing to study something else, would have now come up to understanding, or at least they now are aware of these phrases RCT, which is randomized clinical trial, phase 3 trial, and so on and so forth. So now the process of approval by regulatory authorities and accepting vaccine, and in fact not just vaccine, all drugs, that is all medicines. By drugs I mean medicines. All of these are actually based on randomized control trials, randomized clinical trials, okay, and which involve a few hundred or at most a few thousand observations. You can't say that, till they have a big data generated out of vaccine trials, we will not approve vaccine and will not be available for use. We would have had to wait for 5 years before COVID vaccine will become possible. You would join a program and graduate and you would never see the institute, right? It is only the vaccines which have been there on the market are helping us control and hope that we should be able to come back to at least semblance of normalcy in quick time. So, so the idea of randomized clinical trials is actually borrowed from the statistical idea developed under design of experiments, and these were introduced to study agriculture, use of data in agriculture. That is, for example, to determine what is the best combination of fertilizers to increase yield. And this is again history. I'm not cooking up. Okay. And the writings on these themes are a cornerstone of statistical inference, because whole lot of what is called statistical inference actually evolved in design of experiments. And actually in UK, where some of these ideas evolved, they were actually I'm now for a minute forgetting the name of the agricultural station where these experiments were being done, and people statisticians would go there. I studied at ISI, not at my time, but earlier than my time. My time was, let's say, late 70s, but in 50s and 60s, ISI still has land in Bihar, agricultural land in Bihar, in a place called Giridih, and there were agricultural farming there. And I am told that students in 60s and early 70s, BStat, MStat students, had to go to Giridih and actually go and measure some things and so on and so forth, because it was so important for statistical ideas, this agricultural studies. Okay, so it is these ideas which have been taken up and in randomized clinical trials, later in economics as randomized control trials, same acronym RCT but means slightly different. But these are statistical ideas which have been tested and proven and have been used now in newer contexts. So one of the biggest problems faced by mankind in recent times has only a statistical solution, and it will have to be made based on at best a few thousand data points and not million data points. So with this, I rest my case that not all data problems are big data problems, clearly. Okay. All right. But this doesn't answer the main question. So now let's come to the situation where we actually may have a large data set. So we have seen that there are scenarios where we have small data and these statistical ideas are important and nobody can deny that. Okay. So now what is remaining is what happens when we have actually a large data set. Okay. Most problems that people face, that industries face, are you do have large data set. Now are they relevant? So these days, there is a tendency to just take a chunk of data and process it through statistical or AI/ML engine to obtain relationships amongst variables. You don't need to understand what is regression to open R or Python and run the regression toolbox, right? Run regression, you click on regression, you import data, it will give you an answer. It will even print the answer. You can nicely format it, import it in some report and put the report. You may have no clue of what regression is, right? You can do that. And increasingly, there is a tendency just to do that. Okay. So once again, to the students, what differentiates our program at CMI, this data science program that you have enrolled in, with, I'm not saying all others, but with many other programs called data science running across the country, is the fact that in most others, they are basically taught as toolbox. At best, a few examples that if it is something like this, you should use regression, and then this is how you use regression. Whereas here, we don't necessarily do proofs of all statements involved, but give you little more than toolbox. One extreme is toolbox, other extreme is theory, where you never run any example or never use any software, you only do theorem proof. We have pitched in the middle. We teach you some theoretical concepts, and then maybe some proofs, but not all, and then make you run this from using software, enable you to run software as well. So, this is what I may call pure data-driven analysis without understanding. Just run it through some AI/ML toolbox or statistical toolbox. So in my view, and I'm going to illustrate that, before we push the data through an AI/ML engine, we need to ask questions about the data that has been given. What question? First question, is the data representative of the population we have in mind? Population about which we want to draw the conclusion. Is the data representative? So what do I mean by that? Okay. So as some of you may know, I am actually last 2 decades I'm involved with opinion polls and on media and so on. So these are the examples which come to my mind and you can relate to. So let's say on some political question, a poll is conducted on Republic TV. Let's say farmers agitation, or about approval of the Bharat Biotech vaccine by India before doing phase 3 trial. Some such relevant question at this point of time. A poll is conducted on Republic TV, and well, this is a politically related question, may not be political, or even a political. What will happen in Bengal in the next poll? Okay. So, Republic TV hosts such a poll, and at the same time, NDTV also on their respective websites hosts the same poll. They are likely to yield different results. The poll on Republic TV is likely to be biased towards the position of the ruling party or the government. Same poll on NDTV is likely to be biased against the government. And I'm not saying that the people who are running these websites are tweaking the data. They may be, I don't know. But even if they do a fair poll, this is what is likely to happen. And why? And why am I saying so? Because it is to do with the audience that these sites attract. So those who are favorably disposed towards the government are very likely to go to Republic TV and NDTV, not visit NDTV, and vice versa. More, I'm not saying never, but larger proportion. And thus, the two groups, the regular visitors to Republic TV on one hand and those who visit NDTV on the other hand, they do not represent the voting population of the country. To begin with, the voting population of the country that may not be accessing internet. Even if they do, they may not understand English. They might have weak internet on their phone to do WhatsApp chat or WhatsApp messaging. Okay. So to begin with, the users of websites itself, English websites itself, is not representative. And on top of that, those who visit Republic or those who visit NDTV sites are certainly not representative. So therefore, the results from the two polls, if they are not the same, there should be no surprise. So in any case, neither may be close to the reality. Reality may be something in between. So as I said, and some of you may know, I have been active in opinion poll for Indian election. So people ask me various things, So one of the things of late people have asked me, several leading people have asked me that, oh, they hear me give a talk. I have been giving talk about opinion polls various places. Maybe on this seminar, after a few months, I might give one more. But people say, oh, you are not grown up. Whatever you started doing 20 years ago, going door-to-door surveys, you are still doing that. So grow up. Use modern methodology. Forget door-to-door survey. Use social media data. It is rich. And you are cribbing about only having 20,000 data points. On social media, you will have millions of data points and you can do it faster. So actually people have said this to me. I will not name, but several leading people have also said this to me. Well, one point I will just make is that let's say if in 2014, if I or anybody else had taken the social media data, okay, at face value as it is and driven it through an AI ML engine, even any analysis would have shown that Modi ji or BJP would win 400 seats. They did win close to 300, but it would have shown 400 seats. Simply because at that time, BJP was using social media as a campaign, as a medium of campaign. And so no wonder that the social media there was so much buzz about BJP and Modi ji on social media in 2014. Well, in 2019, the other side also had put in efforts to create a buzz on social media. Not sure what results would have been, but the point is that the just social media data, taking it as it is, firstly, it is coming from a population or coming from a segment of the population that is not representative, okay, because it is only people who are active on social media. Large chunk is not rural folks or lesser literacy or lesser economic status. They are less active on social media. So that group is not representative. On top of that, one of the sites in 2014 was using it as a campaign strategy. So obviously the data will be tweaked in that favor. Okay. Now, when I say this, people say, all this you are saying hypothetically because you don't want to change. The same social media data is used by market research to predict sale of the next iPhone or Pixel smartphone. And when they are using this data, they are actually shelling out big money. So obviously there is value in this. So folks who believe that since it has value, therefore it must be good, they argue like this. Okay, that social media data is relevant, you are dismissing it for no reason. Well, the point is, this is fine because the social media users is the target market for iPhone and Pixel phones. High-end phones is for the richer, urban, younger population which is active on social media. So the social media users is a fair, at least coverage. It may still not be a random sample, so there are other issues, but at least the population that it is coming from is the target population. So it is okay, but not okay for opinion poll. Not now, not next 10 years, not beyond 10, I don't want to say, because who knows what happens in 10 years. Technology side. Okay. All right. So I've illustrated some context where the data is small and they are interesting contexts. Okay. So we need to figure out how the data was taken. So even if this opinion poll data was small, but even when you have large data, you must find out, is it representative? I in fact go on to say that the only way, if you simply ask, is this representative? The person who is giving you data will say, it is representative. So how do you find out? Well, you find out how was it collected. And then you decide your own inference as to is it representative or not. So when I ask people, how was the data collected? They'll say, I'm giving you data, I'm giving you million data points. Why should you bother? How have I collected? It was a big problem for me to collect, to store, to transmit. But having done that, why do you want to know how is it collected? Well, because only then we can figure out whether it is actually representative or not, and whether there are some other hidden biases which may creep up. So what are these? Okay, again, coming back to the current times and the COVID, So early days in COVID, well, not so early, but 2 months down the road, Lancet is a very famous and leading medical journal. Okay, paper in Lancet is taken very seriously by the policymakers and by the medical profession in general. HCQ stands for hydrochloroquine, a medicine used for treating malaria. And early period, there was a belief that HCQ can be useful in containing COVID. In India, in absence of any other medicine, HCQ doses were being used as preventive for frontline healthcare workers. Better than sending them on duty with no protection, they thought that, okay, this is the best we have, so take HCQ. It has no side effects because for it has been used, so just take HCQ. So this was the scenario. Now this paper in Lancet claimed to analyze what they call real world evidence, saying no, we are not doing clinical trial, we are doing actually real world evidence because we have collected real data. And they seem to show that HCQ is not useful in treating COVID-19 infection and actually may be worsening the situation. Their data raised alarm because it showed that the HCQ may be worsening the situation. Okay. Almost what they said was that they had taken data from large number of hospitals across the continents. Such studies are called observational studies, where you actually take existing data, you source the data, collect it means you source the data. You have had no role in data generation. You have no role in deciding what data you will get. There is data, you take it. It's like the COVID data that Saurish analyzed, right? Number of deaths data, India, other countries, that is observational data. It is available, you take it and try to do the best you can. Okay. So these are called observational studies. They have a role, but unless you dig deeper, you have problems. So, in fact, the very next day after Lancet published this, WHO, the World Health Organization, stopped clinical trials which were ongoing involving HCQ. In India, HCQ was used as preventive. Indian Council of Medical Research, their own study was actually showing that HCQ was good as preventive. The paper appeared later, but in spite of WHO ban, ICMR continued with the position, and Indian government continued with the position that we will continue to use HCQ for prevention as a dose for frontline workers. It was criticized a lot, like the phase 3 trial discussion now about Bharat Biotech and phase 3 without that approval. Likewise, in May, there was a lot of debate and discussion on ICMR continuing to use HCQ when WHO has stopped. Well, there were many issues with the statistical analysis in the Lancet paper. Okay. My attention was drawn by some of my friends who were very much involved in policy. But they asked me that, do you see any statistical issue with this paper? And immediately I zeroed into one thing, that they had not factored in as to how patients were chosen who received the HCQ treatment. So the data is, okay, some patients are coming in the hospitals, some are given HCQ, some are not given any other treatment because there was nothing else available. And then you compute the death rates across or recovery rates across the two groups and data from so many continents. Now, if immediately the question, given my statistical thinking, which I believe I do have, the first thing which occurred to me is I was looking for in that data detail as to who are given HCQ. How did the doctors decide who gets HCQ? There was no data on that in that paper. Okay, and this can be a serious problem. So, to see why this can be a serious problem, you should see a Wikipedia article on Simpson's paradox. I strongly recommend all students to go to Wikipedia after the lecture and today or next over the weekend and read Simpson's paradox. This goes back 120 years. Carl Pearson is a name which may appear in your studies. He is one of the early thinkers in statistics. Carl Pearson and his contemporary Yule, okay, their writings have this though it was named after Simpson with some work he did 50 years down the road, people did not attribute to the original creators of this idea, but to Simpson. Doesn't matter. The name, it sticks, so that's fine. And what is this about? Briefly. Okay, again, history. In 73, University of California, Berkeley was accused of gender bias in their graduate school admissions. Okay. And what was the basis of this bias or acquisition? Well, somebody compiled the data. 8442 male applicants, 44% were admitted. 4321 female applicants, only 35% were admitted. And belief was that there should be no other reason to explain other than the bias. So 9% statistically significant. You do any analysis, you will say that, yeah, admission rate amongst females is significantly less. If you test the hypothesis, are the acceptance rates the same across the two groups? It will be thrown out because the data is reasonably large. Okay. So that was the basis for the this claim that there is a gender bias. Well, Berkeley is a place where, another place where lot of statistical ideas have developed and have leading statisticians have been on the faculty there. So they felt very bad that as it is, Berkeley is a very progressive school and they would like to believe that they have no such bias. And they said, oh, this data is alarming, we should examine. They felt that maybe there is one or two departments where it is very poor and that is tweaking the whole university data. So they decided to look at the department-wise data, figure out which department is responsible. And when they looked at the data-wise, department-wise numbers, what they saw is extremely interesting. So this is the actual data. You can go to the website and see the data. Okay. So for this, the formatting is done by me so that I can present it on a nice slide. But the data is from websites. Perhaps Wikipedia article itself or some other article on Berkeley. At Berkeley is the problem. Okay. So there are lots of departments. Some maybe only 5 students are admitted on so many. So they have this data. They have taken large 6 departments. Okay, where at least 700 people have applied or 500 plus people have applied, and at least so many were admitted. Okay, so that they taken, and then it says across all applicants percentage selected, across males percentage selected, across females percentage selected. And what we see that, let's see, in the largest one, A, actually percentage selection amongst female candidates is far more than amongst men. Indeed, in the large 2, with large selections, the selection of female selected is much more than the male selected. Here there is a large applicants, but the proportion of selection is small as compared to the other 2. And here men are selected little more. The difference is only little in this favor, here little in that favor, and so on. So if you look at department-wise data, you will not be convinced. Any statistical analysis, you will conclude that overall there doesn't seem to be any bias. Okay, if anything, in the 2 large departments there is a other bias. One thing which is tweaking is this department C. The large number of applicants, there is a marginal 37% versus 34%. This is one which we can see that there is a difference. But in these 2 where selection rates are even higher and higher than among the men, the number of females who are applying here is small. Okay. When you put together, lo and behold, you get a picture that overall across the acceptance rates are 44 and 35. You drill down and you see this is not. This is what is called Simpson's paradox, that At desegregated level, you may see one-way picture, and when you aggregate the data and look at the picture, you may get a completely opposite conclusion. This is Simpson's paradox. And no magic in this, no statistical theory behind this. Just the first impression you would get by looking at the data would be different when you look at department-wise data and when you look at the overall data. That's all we are saying. So this is called a confounding factor. If you ignore department, that's a confounding factor which is actually hiding behind you, hiding the real picture, and you ignore that, something else is appearing to you. Okay. Now, coming back to the Lancet paper, if we don't know, since there is no data, but it is easy to postulate that if there is only one medicine and that too may be in short supply, or they were somewhat uncertain whether it will be any good or not, if I were a doctor, I would give it to people who really need it. So if someone is with a severe symptom, I might give, and someone who is just showing mild symptom, I might not give. Okay. So if it were the case that only patients with severe symptoms were given HCQ, or older population, people like me will get, some people like Saurish may not get, because I am more at risk than someone like Saurish. So if it were the case that people who are more at risk were being given HCQ and people who are not at risk were being not given HCQ, then you will have the same thing happening as in the this department picture that we saw at Berkeley. Wherever there was So if it were the case that only people with severe symptoms were given HCQ, then we will see a similar thing. And this is what is being called symptomatic and asymptomatic. So being symptomatic or asymptomatic could be a confounding factor, which is tweaking the result. There is absolutely no reason why HCQ should be shown to be doing worse. That is what alerted all of us, that there is no earthly reason. At best, it could have said it has no impact. Why is it saying it has worse impact? Kuch hoga. Okay. So this confounding factor is also known as omitted variable bias in econometrics literature. That the bias in your conclusion that creeps in because you omitted an important variable, called omitted variable bias. Okay. So Lancet paper came under a lot of attack and it was eventually retracted by the journal. Since this is not a conference and so on, I might exceed my time limit a little. I know there is no talk following me, so I'm not eating in anybody's thing. Plus, people can quietly leave if they have to. All right. So my point is that if the referees of Lancet paper were aware of Simpson's paradox, the paper would not have been published in the first place. Paper published and it did some damage to the overall scenario. Okay. So a randomized clinical trial takes care of such factors, symptomatic, asymptomatic, and allocates treatment appropriately. But even in an observational study, at least if you are aware of this and ask these questions, you will avoid making such bad conclusions. So ignoring well-studied and well-documented statistical ideas can lead to erroneous conclusions. That is my statement. So knowing how data is collected helps us in determining if the analysis is ignoring a variable important for the conclusions sought to be drawn. Also, it will reveal if there is any selection bias or censoring bias. So what are these? Selection bias is in an exit poll, an enumerator who stands outside a booth to ask people, chooses only folks who look educated enough so that he or she can quickly finish the exercise. So invariably, in the data obtained at exit poll times, there is a bias amongst relatively well-to-do, relatively more educated, relatively better dressed people. This is selection bias. What is censoring bias? If you are dealing with data on deaths due to cancer among the patient, and suppose you have data, so if we look at people who are infected and only people whose cause of death is recorded as cancer and treat it as the last word and use it to compute death rates, we are going to have a wrong answer, because somebody could have died of heart attack and the cause of death is written as heart, but if the person had not died out of heart attack, maybe in next month or maybe next year, he or she could have died due to cancer. So death not due to heart, due to cancer cannot be concluded that, the person was never going to die because of cancer, or the age and so on and so forth. So this is a classic thing studied in statistics and medical literature. And this is one of the big questions, censoring bias, and how do you make inference even when you have censored data. Another example, we have at CMI have not done it, but other places people have tried to do such things. So let's say we have run the data science program, only one batch has passed right now. But let's say BSc program CMI has for 20 years. So 20 years we have the data on selection test scores, and the students who actually joined, we have their performance in CMI. Now, if we try to discover relationship, could we predict who will be the topper, or who would be the top half, or who would be the top 10% as far as their performance at CMI in the coursework based on selection test data? We'll do very poorly. We have not done it at CMI, but at places even at ISI, one of my colleagues had done this, and we had a debate on this. Invariably, we will see that there is very poor correlation, and therefore, these people, those who do such studies conclude that your selection test is very bad. Either do away with it or change it completely. Again, wrong conclusion, because you have only data on students who are selected. Okay, so you have censoring bias. You don't know how well or poorly are the students who are not selected would have done. So you have data only on a small cross section out of the one for which you have the first data set available. Another classical idea remains as important as ever is correlation does not imply causation. So this perhaps would be taught in your statistics course, and I will not stress this much here. Indeed, correlation may be spurious correlation explainable by other confounding factors. So if it were not at CMI, I was talking at some engineering college, I would have elaborated here a little, but in view of time, I will not. Indeed, several articles reporting that countries with higher GDP have higher death rate. As you can even glance at the table on, say, World Meter site about country-wise death rates, you will see richer countries, Western countries, richer countries have higher death rates per million than India or other poorer countries. And actually, detailed analysis will show that it can be explained by the age profile of the population, urbanization index, sanitation, incidence of autoimmune disorders, and so on. So, just correlation doesn't mean causation. It would be meaningless that richer countries have a higher death rate. Why? So, following statistical ideas are important when analyzing the data. That's what I have talked. Representativeness of the data. Is it subject to selection bias or censorship bias? Is there omitted variable bias? And one must remember, correlation not implies causation. Okay. So, as I said in the beginning, there is a fashionable to just pure data-driven analysis. Namely, take data, put it in the engine, AI, ML engine, statistics engine. This is what I call pure data-driven. Possible pitfalls of that. How, again, historical. So, Sir Francis Galton, who was a cousin of Darwin, a few years younger than Darwin, influenced by Darwin's work on evolution, was studying inheritance of characteristics. He was primarily interested in intelligence, and based on that, he had formulated some hypotheses. He did some concrete experiments using sweet peas. Interestingly, they have been used by others in experiments also, and he formulated a hypothesis that the daughter seeds were likely to be closer to the average side of the seed than the mother seed. So what he had done was he had taken some seeds which are obviously looking healthier, bigger seeds than the average, and used them to plant and then you reap a next generation because it happens very quickly. You can do an experiment and see. And he saw this was his observation. And he sent got some friends to do the experiment. Everybody had the same observation. So based on this, he postulated a hypothesis that, and he believed that this is just one thing. The same will apply to other characteristics, human characteristics also, not just speech, and it will apply to everything, including intelligence. And his hypothesis was that, so he studied human population, he studied heights of father-son pairs. So this is not exactly what he has done, but this is a story I am writing. You can read up. It is take father and mother and average height and so on and so forth. But okay. So father and son pairs, and concluded the following: that if the father is taller than average, then the son will also be taller but shorter than father. If father is shorter than average, son will also be shorter than average but taller than father. So he said that this is regression to the mean. So the height of the next generation is coming closer to the mean. And if he postulated the same thing will happen over generations, and his thing was that across time, eventually everybody will be reduced to same height. Well, nothing wrong with that. But he argued everybody will be reduced to the same intelligence. There'll be no super intelligent, there'll be no genius and no fool. Everybody will be ordinary. Okay. And he actually argued this and believed this and led to all kinds of ideas. It started with a subject which was called eugenics, a subject now forgotten, but there was a department, there was a chair of eugenics professor. Carl Pearson, whose name appeared earlier and is a big name in statistics, was actually eugenics professor at University College London. And do read about eugenics and about Carl Pearson and Galton. Their work, while is important, and that was a starting point of various things, but their writings are out and out racist. In fact, over last 10 years or more, there had been a lot of agitation in London, in University College, that the names of these two gentlemen have to be erased from history of the college, because they have brought a lot of disrepute. And this last year in June, actually the authorities agreed, and building named after buildings, roads, etc., named after Galton and Carl Pearson have been renamed. Okay, but Galton had only few hundred observations. Today, you obtain data on passports, and you will get few 100,000 data points, and you push the data to an AI ML engine, you will get the same observation as Galton. Problem well studied in statistics. You have later two regression lines, X on Y and Y on X. If you have not studied, you will see it when you hear regression. Okay. So, so this is called confirmation bias. Bias because Galton strongly believed in something. He looked at a data. He looked at it only from one angle. And yes, I am right. So you basically are not using data for deriving intelligence. You are using it to reconfirm your own belief. So confirmation bias. Now the last thing, it's 3 o'clock, but one more point I have. So importance of model, mathematical and statistical. So statistical model is an important part of the data interpretation exercise. In fact, the underlying model is the connection between the data and the objective. The model gives us the right frame of reference to interpret the data and substantiate this view from another example from the history, the last one. So during World War II, which was early years of use of aircraft in war, British Air Force aircraft were doing sorties over Germany. In that time, this was very early years, so aircrafts were just ordinary aircraft. They were flying very low. There were no anti-aircraft guns either. So they were using just standard guns and shooting them in the air, looking at the aircraft and aiming and shooting them. So some people were keeping data on aircraft. Some were returning, some were falling. They were keeping data on returning aircrafts. And somebody was actually noting down how many were hit on wing, how many were hit on the underbelly at this point, how many were hit in the underbelly in the front, etc., etc. And after some time, he compiled the data that some parts seemed to be a lot more susceptible to receiving hits, and the report was written that they should put more metal or strengthen somehow this portion of the aircraft where they are observing more hits. It so happened that by then US was in the war, and this data and this conclusion somehow they was also shared with US, and there Abraham Wald, a statistics or mathematics professor who was also consulting with the US Defense, happened to see this, and he said, no, something is wrong here. And I'm putting words here. This is declassified again on the web, but I'm putting it in a nutshell. That he looked at the problem for a different point of view, that there is a selection bias in the data. Only the aircraft that survived are coming back. You don't have data on the aircraft which fell down. So he had two assumptions which were valid for that time, that people were not aiming at any specific point. They were just arbitrarily or randomly they were being fired. So all parts are equally likely to be hit. So and that there were no redundancies. Like in today's engine, there is redundancy that if the aircraft can fly with one engine, they will insist that there should be two. If they can fly, then to fly it needs two, they'll insist there should be third. That is redundancy. So no redundancy, and it meant that the effect of hit on a given area is independent of effect of hit in any other area. Okay. If it is to fall down, it will fall down. Doesn't matter what is the status of the other area. So independence. Once you put these two assumptions in thing, these were reasonable model, and for that time, the surprising conclusion that came up was that you should strengthen the areas of the aircraft where no damage or relatively less damage is observed among the aircraft that are returned. And little bit of thinking, all parts are equally likely to be hit. So why is it that you are not observing something here? Elementary, Watson. It means if it hits there, it is gone. You need to strengthen it there. The point is, after the fact explanation is very easy, but they had actually recommended that you should put armor or strengthen the parts where you are seeing more hits. It was only when you put it in the right frame of reference or the right model can you see through the clearly what is happening. Okay? And so you can ignore these statistical ideas only at your own risk. Okay. Now it so happened that the region that came up with low hits and hence needed reinforcement was the engine. It made a lot of sense, and the recommendations were immediately accepted by Air Force. So as data scientists, you should remember, let's say you take up a job, you do analyze some data, and you are very excited by something that you have discovered. You go to your management or your reporting manager or to the management of the company, wherever, depending on how senior you are, with that recommendation. So they ask you, okay, but why do you say so? Well, one first answer could be that you have done data analysis and that is what is showing. But you have to have something beyond that. Because the policymakers are not going to just accept just because your AI/ML engine is saying this, therefore they must change their policy. You will need to connect it. You need to understand the domain. If you have not understood the domain before analyzing the data, you will be forced to do that after you analyze the data. Because only when you present it coherently and making sense, it makes sense to the end user, only then your analysis is worth anything. Okay. So in AI now, it is a new area of work called explainable AI. Just saying that my neural network model says so is not good enough. You have to be able to explain it. So for some problems, the explainability is needed because of regulation. So if police is randomly checking at the airports, security check, randomly subjecting people for more scrutiny. Now US, it is there in records that if you are a minority, so if you are black, if you have Muslim sounding name, if you have beard, if you are Asian looking, you will be more likely to be tested. Okay. After COVID, before it became so serious, they were not perhaps testing everybody, but if you are Chinese looking face, they will surely test you for whether you are having any disease or not, right? So then the accusation would be that you are doing racial profiling, and then they can say that no, you are doing an AI/ML model, and therefore we are doing this. it will not fly in the court. You will need to explain why you are doing it. So in any case, you will need to go dig into the domain to understand why your conclusion that you are coming up is the right conclusion. Okay. So take away from this example is importance of domain knowledge and building a good model. So as I said, a model is a frame of reference which connects the data and the conclusion that you are aiming to draw from it, yes or no. Okay. Wrong frame of reference, maybe wrong conclusion. Right frame of reference is what is necessary. Okay. And it is while building a model, one must take into account everything you know about the underlying phenomena, talk to experts. It's a must. Never say that, just data is going to be good enough. I don't need to know the domain experts. No, it's a must. At least validate what you are getting. You say, oh, this is what I'm saying. Why? Then they'll say, yeah. This is, now it makes sense now that you point out. Okay. At least that much is a must. Ideally, even before you put it in the AI/ML engine. So based on the understanding of the underlying phenomena, an analyst can build hypotheses about relationships. And then pure data mining techniques can also be used to throw up possible relationships, but then the analyst and the domain experts can see which of these are relevant and which are not. So you throw out the irrelevant ones, focus on the relevant ones, and then draw on in conclusion. If historical data is available, you can then examine if the hypothesis seem to be true using back testing. Else you split the data into training set, testing set, and then you can use, etc., etc. So all these techniques you will be learning. But I conclude by saying that statistical ideas and concepts that have evolved over the last 150 years have a role to play if we are used to use the data that we now have to draw valid, actionable intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. This was really nice presentation. And before I open the floor for the discussion, I just want to make one comment. One is the agricultural station. The name of the agricultural station is Rothamsted Agricultural Station in England.
I knew that, but for a minute I forgot.
Yeah. And R.A. Fisher started his career from there. Yeah. So that
probably C.R. Rao must have visited that, because C.R. Rao visited Fisher, and Fisher must have taken him to Rothamsted, because that was like the Makkah for statistics.
Makkah for statistics then, yes, agree. Another point I would like to make, for particularly in context of big data. So I have seen when people talk about big data, typically they talk about volume and speed and all those typical jargon. But for statistician, big data is, I think, a very different thing. Because if you see, I typically give this example. Say, suppose you have image classification task and you have 100,000 images. Okay. Now there are two data scientists. One data scientist is trying to fit a deep network model with only 5,000 parameters. Another data scientist who is trying to fit another deep network model with 10 million parameters. Now for two data scientists, 100,000 data means very different.
Yes.
For the data scientist who is fitting a deep network with 5,000 parameters, 100,000 image will be large data. But a second data scientist who is fitting a deep network model with a million parameters, for it, it's a small data.
Agreed.
So this is something oftentimes I have seen data scientists miss this underpinning of actual data analysis and the modeling part. So when we call large data or a small data, we always have some model in our mind, and that model has number of parameters. We always frame
it to the parameters.
Exactly. So, okay, I should not steal any time. Now the floor is open, and please if you have any question, please. So you can also write it into the chat box directly, so that.
Hello, Rajitha. Nice talk. Shubhashish here.
Hi, hello. Thank you.
Wonderful talk. As you know, right, like now there is a common trend in industry as well as academia that statistics is history. There is the era of AI ML. Yeah. People are saying, and we are we are observing that there are a lot of people with different background. They learn data science, AI ML, and they are now coming and joining the workforce. But then eventually what I noticed that the fundamental understanding is very weak. It's a big problem for us.
I know.
Yeah, so that is a very common thing that I am noticing for the last 3-4 years.
I can't agree with more with you because in fact, at various places they are planning data science programs, and when they have me on the committee, this is one point I am making, that you don't have to teach theorem proof, but these concepts you cannot ignore.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody who knows how to use a computer, you train him for 15 days, that is good enough. Why is it not good enough? Why do you need a 2-year program? Exactly. So that you can go deeper inside the black box when things are not working. You see, Shubhashish, the thing is that maybe 90% of the cases it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you are not needed there. You, me, none of us are needed 90% of the cases. But it is the 10% where things can go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that is how I have picked out these examples where you reached almost diametrically opposite conclusions. Right?
Yeah.
So the concepts are extremely important, and so I am become an evangelist for statistics because.
so in this topic, I have to say that there are some places, even in the industries, especially pharmaceutical, as well as some regulatory committees like FDA.
Yeah.
They need it's a kind of a hard and fast rule that without a statistician's agreement you cannot proceed.
Agreed. I know that.
And this type of team, like they must have people with a statistics degree, not any other degree.
Yeah.
So
but you see WHO committee, which I'm sure had statistical advisors, if not the main committee which decided.
Exactly.
They did not raise questions with Lancet. In fact,
Lancet.
I will not name people, but even people with good statistics background would not see eye to eye with me when I was raising the questions on Lancet paper. Okay.
Yeah.
So I will not name the individuals.
Exactly.
But, so the thing is, somehow there is always this what is confirmation bias. Okay. So one of the reasons with HCQ what happened was that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump were pushing that. Okay. Now there are tons of people who don't like Mr. Modi, and there are even bigger tons of who don't like Trump.
Yeah.
So the reaction to the Lancet paper was somehow based on their reaction to Modi and Trump. Now, which is ridiculous. You may like or dislike Modi and Trump. I have no issue.
Exactly.
But this is a scientific. The question I was raising about this omitted variable bias, I didn't put it in that framework. And unfortunately, I somehow had not known of the Simpson's paradox. Otherwise, I would have pinpointedly said this. Okay. But my statistical thinking, I could sense this, that since you don't have this data, this is useless data.
Yeah.
We actually wrote to WHO. By we, I mean myself, then Dr. Shekhar Mande, who is Director General CSIR, and Anurag Agrawal, who is Director of Indian Genomics, IGIB, Genomics Laboratory of CSIR. 3 of us took it up. We wrote in Indian media, we wrote to WHO, we wrote to Lancet, raising these objections. Of course, in the end, they said that there were other problems with the data. The paper is withdrawn. So now your letter is also null and void because the paper is withdrawn. Anyway, the point is, when people with statistics, they somehow, forget. So these ideas are really important. Yeah.
So what should be your advice to the next generation who like some of us are observing that is there like this data science AI ML is replacing our statistical heritage in future?
I think it is replacing because somehow the reaction of the statistics world, okay, has been treating this as enemies. You are encroaching on my territory. Okay.
Yeah.
So you say that, oh, you are doing this, but we have been doing this in Bootstrap in the name of Bootstrap for ages. We try to show that we have been using it. Doesn't matter whether who discovered it independently, this, that. The point is that these two should collaborate and improve things rather than fight with each other. Okay. So the right thing to do will be to work together. Maths, stats, CS, AI, ML folks, everybody to work together to use this data. And we should stress on, I mean, we have to redesign.
And with this, I close this session.
I guess the students know that normally after this, we would be having tea with everybody and we'd have casual chat and maybe some biscuits, maybe some snacks.
Right.
Of course, we can't do any of that. Too bad. Hope we get back to normalcy. And actually, some of the first year students have not been to CMI at all, nor have we seen them. And even the second year students, it's been now nearly 10 plus months since they have been on campus. Let's hope in another month or 2 months, things will improve. That all signs look like that, but let's wait and see.
Okay. Yes. So I will put up the recorded lecture on the YouTube and share the link with all of you. So one question Vishita is asking, as an aspiring data scientist, what are the fundamentals we need to learn prevent these errors?
Yeah, so I think firstly, the courses which are made as part of your curriculum, okay. Are you student at MSc Data Science here, or you are somebody from outside? She's a student.
Yes, I think she's
data science. Yeah.
Data science first
year or second year?
So first year.
First year data science.
So you will see that some of this, you will have a few statistics courses as core and few others maybe even as optionals. So first thing is to take them very seriously. Don't get taken in by this that degrees data science ka degree chahiye ya statistics ka kuch padhne ki zarurat nahi hai. Don't do that. Digest that, and in addition, try to do some additional reading around it. Okay. If you say you read regression, then go to website, go and start reading on regression on Wikipedia. Look at the connected articles there. Okay. Things like that. In particular, you should definitely go and read things which are, you do 2 types of Google search. Once you do paradox, probability. Okay. And whichever links come, try to read them. Discuss with friends, each other, discuss with your teachers, discuss with me, though formally I'm not teaching you anymore this semester or next semester maybe, but I'm still open for discussion. So paradox, probability, paradox, statistics, because it is this word paradox, which means something looks apparently confusion, some gadbad hai somewhere. Okay. So that brings out some essentials, and you will learn quite a bit on these. So maybe some of you can read a few things on paradoxes and put together one session like this. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great, Oshita. You got your assignments from Rajivda. So, all right. Any other question? Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask, how is opinion polls not a field of big data? As sir had mentioned,
because you see, okay, so firstly it depends on how you are sourcing the data. Okay, So now, if I go to 2019 Lok Sabha election, there were some who claimed that they declared their data size as 6 lakhs, 20 lakhs. Okay. And well, that might not qualify as big data in the way big data is word is used, but even that I have my own doubts that that perhaps is something like data obtained from social media. Okay, it may not quite be. So the data obtained then is no longer random, and it may be subject to all the biases which I listed. Okay, so unbiased data collection in opinion poll, you can't really go with million data points. So all the data that I have used all the time, 20 years, the largest sample size I may have looked at was about 40,000 or 50,000, not more. Typically less for entire India. Okay. And indeed, if you go to the fine print of various polls published in the US, various nationwide polls in US, the data is only of the order of 1,000 to 1,500. Okay. So therefore, opinion poll is certainly not a big data problem. But not just opinion poll, there is a thing called National Sample Survey. They keep collecting data on various socio-economic parameters, which are supposed to be used for by the government for policy making and by industry for some planning. That is also based on their sample size, maybe 1 lakh or 2 lakh, but then they're trying to cover the extensive population at a very grassroots level. And then again, the conclusions are being drawn based on a small number of data points. So it is not quite a big data problem.
Okay.
As I promised, if there is interest, we can have an opinion poll talk separately, which can take it's again 1 hour of its own.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So there is one comment from Nishant Rajamani. Thank you for the neat presentation. Gene by Siddharth Mukherjee's brilliant intro to history and importance of statistics in our understanding of the natural world. Cost of misinterpretation on our history, eugenics. Yes, I agree that that's a really good book by Siddharth Mukherjee. Your session took me back to all those learnings. Thank you for the thoroughness. Thank you, Nishant, for your
Thank
comment.
you, Nishant. Yeah. So somehow I had missed this book. So maybe now that you say it, I'll read it.
Yes. Yeah, I actually, I half read it. It's a really, really nice book, actually. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Sure. All right. If we do not have any further question or anything, then I would like to thank Rajivda again for this wonderful session. I'm sure this was a wonderful learning for our students, and particularly for the data science first year and second year students. And I hope that we keep organizing such more session, and we'll be announced those sessions very soon. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Rajivda.
Bye.
Bye.